Commander Vekler stood on the edge of the rocky cliff, staring at the ruined human outpost far below. The cold wind of the moon's night stung his scaled skin, carrying with it the smell of burnt metal and old blood. He had fought many battles against humans, and each one had left a scar on his body and a deeper scar on his heart. To him, humans were not just enemies. They were the reason his world had lost so much. They had taken his brothers in battle. They had taken his mate in the bombing of his city. And worst of all, they had taken his child. Vekler's hatred for them burned hotter than the suns of his home system. The war had lasted years, longer than anyone had expected. Both sides had suffered losses, but in Vekler's eyes, no alien loss could compare to what the humans had done to him. When the High Command assigned him to patrol this abandoned sector, he welcomed the silence. There were no humans left here, only the ruins of their defeat. He could walk among their broken machines and shattered walls and feel a bitter sense of victory. His patrol scanner beeped softly in the quiet night. Vekler frowned, adjusting the device strapped to his arm. A faint distress signal was blinking on the screen, weak and fading. It came from just beyond the edge of the outpost, near the jagged rocks where escape pods sometimes crashed. Curious but cautious, he followed the signal, moving swiftly through the dust and shadows. His boots crunched over shattered glass and twisted metal as he closed in on the source. There, half buried in the sand, lay a small human escape pod. Its surface scorched and dented. The hatch was partially open, steam rising from the damaged seals. Vekler's first thought was to destroy it, to crush whatever lay inside before it could be a threat. He stepped closer, his rifle ready, the glow of his visor casting red light across the wreckage. With a hiss of hydraulics, he forced the hatch open, expecting a soldier, maybe a pilot. Instead, he froze inside the pod. Wrapped in a torn emergency blanket was a tiny human infant. Its skin was pale, its eyes closed, its chest rising and falling in slow, fragile breaths. A soft whimper escaped its lips. And in the dim light, Vekler saw small fingers curl weakly. The sight hit him like a blade. For a moment, he was no longer a commander of war, but a father remembering the sound of his own child's voice. Memories he had buried deep came rushing back. The laughter of his hatchling, the way they had clung to his arm. Then came the memory of the explosion, the screams, and the silence that followed. Vekler's grip tightened on his weapon. This was a human, and humans had taken everything from him. One less human would be justice. All he had to do was turn away, let the cold night take its course. But the baby let out another weak cry. It was not a cry of anger or defiance. It was a cry of need, of helplessness. Vekler's chest ached in a way it had not for many years. He looked around, scanning for other humans. But there was no one. The pod systems were nearly dead, and the baby's condition was fragile. If he left it, it would not survive the hour. The logical choice, the choices people expected him to make, was to leave it behind. But his feet did not move. Instead, he reached down, his large clawed hands hesitating before touching the bundle. The baby was so small, it barely filled his grasp. Its warmth seeped into his palm, and for a reason he could not explain, he did not let go. The wind howled across the rocky plain, carrying the sound of distant thunder. Vekler knew that if anyone saw him with the child, they would call him a traitor. Saving a human, even a baby, was against everything he had fought for. Yet in that moment, he felt something strange, something he had not felt since before the war, a spark of compassion. He pulled the blanket tighter around the baby and held it close to his chest, shielding it from the cold. The child stirred slightly, letting out a faint sigh. Vekler glanced at the sky, knowing this single decision would change everything. He turned away from the pod and began walking back toward the shadows. The scanner on his arm beeped again, this time warning of an incoming storm. Dark clouds rolled across the horizon, lightning flashing between them. The journey back to his outpost would be dangerous. But leaving the child here was no longer an option. As he moved through the ruins, the baby's breathing softened into a quiet rhythm. Vekler tightened his hold, his mind torn between duty and something far deeper, the hatred he had carried for years felt. Different, not gone, but no longer so certain, far above. The stars shone cold and distant. Below them, an alien warrior carried a human child through the night. Neither knew it yet, but this small moment, this single act of mercy, would ripple across two worlds, and for the first time in a long time. Commander Vekler felt that maybe his life was no longer just about war. The storm was closer now, lightning flashing across the black clouds as Vekler reached the cover of a jagged rock formation. The baby stirred in his arms, making a faint, uncertain sound, not quite a cry, not quite a sigh. Vekler set his rifle down against the stone wall and studied the small face beneath the blanket. The skin was soft, too fragile for the biting winds of this moon. Every instinct in him screamed that this was wrong, not just wrong by his people's laws, but wrong for who he was. He was a soldier, a hunter, a destroyer of human life, not a guardian. The baby opened its eyes for the first time, too small. Orbs of innocent light staring up at him without fear. It was strange, being looked at that way, in war. Every human he faced had eyes full of hate or terror, but this one looked at him like he was just another strange shape in the world. No judgment, no history, no war. That look unsettled him more than any weapon could. Vekler turned away sharply, muttering to himself, "If I take you, they will call me traitor. If I leave you, the night will take you." The words sounded heavy in the air. He could already imagine the whispers among his own kind. The shame of being seen with a human, the punishment from the high command, exile, maybe even death. A cold wind swept in, carrying grains of dust that clung to his armor. The baby shivered. Curling deeper into the torn blanket, Vekler felt his jaw tighten. He had seen grown soldiers die without flinching. Yet this tiny creature could not even survive a breeze without trembling. And still, it had survived a crash landing. There was a kind of strength in that, even if the human did not know it. His communicator beeped softly, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a coded message from the patrol grid. Routine check-in from his squad. They would want to know where he was. If they learned about the baby, they would demand he hand it over. And he knew exactly what would happen to it then. Interrogation, testing, disposal. The thought made his hands close protectively around the child before he even realized it. Vekler pressed a clawed finger to the communicator and sent back a short reply. "Sector clear, no survivors found." The lie came too easily. He stared down at the child again, his mind a storm just as fierce as the one overhead. The baby's breathing was uneven now. Vekler recognized the signs: weakness, dehydration, hunger. If he was going to leave it, he would have to do it now before his own resolve broke completely. He stepped back toward the open plain, turning his back on the child, one step, then another. But the moment the wind carried another thin cry to his ears, his steps slowed. By the third step, he had stopped entirely. He looked back. The blanket had slipped slightly, exposing the child's tiny hand, reaching into the air as if searching for something to hold. It was a gesture so small, yet it hit Vekler harder than any battlefield blow. His memories came again, his own hatchling's hand gripping his finger in the safety of their home. The warmth, the trust, the unspoken promise that a parent would protect. That promise had been broken once, and the pain of it had fueled his hate. But now he wondered, could keeping this promise to another's child take that hate away? Even just a little. The storm was almost overhead now, the first heavy drops of rain striking the metal of the ruined pod. Lightning lit the sky in jagged lines, and the ground trembled under distant thunder. If the baby stayed here, it would be gone before the sun rose. Vekler's decision was made before he could stop it. He turned back, knelt beside the child, and lifted it once more into his arms. The blanket rustled as he pulled it tighter, shielding it from the rain. This Changes nothing, he told himself, though he knew it was a lie. He slung his rifle over his back and started toward the long path to the outpost. The rain turned to a downpour, soaking the ground into slippery mud. Vekler's armor was built for battle, not for carrying a child through a storm, but he adjusted his hold, keeping the baby close to his chest where it was warm. The infant seemed calmer now, its small breaths steady against him. Every step felt heavier, not because of the weight, but because of the choice he had made in the distance. A flash of movement caught his eye. A scout drone, hovering low over the ruins. Vekler ducked behind a crumbling wall, holding the child still. The drone passed overhead, its sensors sweeping the ground. If it detected the baby, there would be no hiding his actions, but luck, or something else, kept them hidden. When it moved on, Vekler exhaled slowly and continued forward. The outpost was still several hours away. The path would take them through shadowed ravines and across open plains where any patrol could spot them. Yet Vekler's focus had narrowed to a single point: keep the child alive until morning. The war, the orders, the hatred, all of it faded to the edges. Tonight, there was only this one task, and though he would not admit it aloud, part of him already knew, the moment he picked up that child, he had crossed a line he could never return from. The rain had slowed by the time Vekler reached the edge of the canyon pass. The path ahead was narrow, with high cliffs on either side, a perfect place for an ambush. He shifted the baby in his arms, adjusting the blanket so no part of its skin was exposed to the cold. The child's breathing was steady now, but Vekler knew its condition was still fragile. He needed to reach shelter soon. But the canyon was the only way forward, and it was also the most dangerous. Halfway into the pass, his communicator crackled to life. A voice came through, the sharp, commanding tone of Captain Drex, his squad leader. "Commander Vekler, your patrol reports are inconsistent." "Explain." Vekler's jaw clenched, his mind racing. He pressed the button to reply, keeping his voice steady. "No contact with humans. Sector remains clear." There was a pause on the line, too long to be comfortable. Then Drex's voice returned, colder now. "We detected a human distress signal in your sector. Report its status immediately." Vekler's eyes scanned the canyon walls, half expecting to see the glint of a scope. They were watching him. He could feel it. If they were close enough to track the signal, they were close enough to follow him. He replied with a single word: destroyed, and cut the link before Drex could question further. It was a dangerous move, but letting them keep asking would only lead to discovery. Moments later, he heard it, the faint hum of a patrol skimmer. The sound was distant, but growing louder, echoing off the canyon walls. He ducked into a shallow cave, holding the baby close as the skimmer's spotlight swept the rocky ground. The light passed within meters of his hiding place. The baby stirred, letting out a small sound, and Vekler pressed his palm gently over its head. "Quiet, little one," he whispered, his voice almost trembling. The light lingered for a moment longer, then moved on, the hum fading into the distance. But he knew this was only the beginning. If Drex suspected anything, he would send more patrols. And once the High Command learned about the signal, the hunt would be relentless. Vekler emerged from the cave and pressed on through the canyon, moving quickly but carefully. Every shadow looked like a soldier. Every gust of wind sounded like approaching engines. An hour later, the terrain opened into a barren plateau. Here, there was no cover, nothing but scattered boulders and the ruins of an old communications tower. Vekler decided to make for the tower. Its collapsed base might offer shelter from both the weather and the eyes in the sky. He had barely taken a dozen steps across the open ground when the air filled with a new sound, the high-pitched whine of aerial drones, 3 of them, descending in formation, their searchlights sweeping wide arcs. Vekler dropped low and sprinted toward the tower, his armor plates clinking softly. The baby began to fuss, sensing the tension in his movements. He murmured something in his own language, a lullaby from long ago. It felt strange on his tongue. But the sound seemed to calm the child just enough. A beam of light passed dangerously close, and he slid behind the tower's crumbling wall just in time. The drone circled overhead, scanning the ground. Vekler stayed still, barely breathing. If they scanned the inside of the tower's shell, he would be exposed. Seconds stretched into minutes, until finally the drones veered away. Heading back toward the canyon, he let out a slow breath, realizing his hands were shaking. Not from fear of being caught, he had faced death many times, but from the knowledge that if he was caught now, the child would not survive. He sat the baby down on a patch of dry blanket inside the tower. The child's small eyes fluttered open, meeting his gaze. In that moment, Vekler realized something. The fear he felt was no longer for himself. For the first time in years, his life was not the only one that mattered. He didn't have long to think about it. From the direction of the canyon came the sound of engines again, but this time it was heavier. Troop carriers. Drex was coming in person. Vekler's mind moved fast. If they cornered him here, there would be no escape. He gathered the baby and checked his rifle. He would have to take a longer, more dangerous route, through the marshlands to the east, a place even his own people avoided. As the first shadows of the carriers appeared on the plateau's edge, Vekler slipped out the back of the tower. He moved low, keeping to the deepest patches of shadow. The storm had passed, but the ground was slick, slowing his movements. Behind him, Drex's voice carried across the wind, barking orders. Fan out, search every ruin. Nothing leaves this sector alive. Vekler's pace quickened. The marshlands were hours away, and night was falling again, but if he could reach them, the thick mist and unstable ground might be enough to lose the pursuit. With the baby's quiet breaths against his armor, he pushed forward. He knew the hunt had truly begun, and from this point on, every step would be a step into deeper danger. Asterisk, the marshlands lay ahead like a living shadow, a wide stretch of black water, tangled roots, and rising mist. Most soldiers avoided this place, not because of enemy traps, but because the land itself was alive and hungry. Vekler stood at the edge, the baby in his arms, listening to the distant hum of search drones fading into the night. He knew the marsh was dangerous, but so was staying on open ground. If Drex's soldiers caught up, there would be no escape. The mist rolled over his armor as he stepped in, the water swallowing his boots with a sucking sound. The air was thick with the smell of decay. Strange calls echoed through the darkness, low, rumbling noises followed by sharp clicks. Predators here were patient. They watched from beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to strike. Vekler kept his rifle ready, his other arm holding the baby close against his chest. The child shifted slightly, making a soft sound. He whispered in his own language again, low and steady. It was not a song this time, but words meant to keep his own focus. I will get you through, little one. I will get you through. The ground beneath the water shifted. Vekler stopped, his instincts flaring. Something large moved under the surface, circling them. A ripple spread outward, and he caught the faint glint of a yellow eye just beneath the dark water. Slowly, he backed toward a cluster of thick roots rising from the marsh. The movement in the water followed, silent but certain. In one sudden motion, a massive shape erupted. A marsh stalker, its jaw lined with bone-like spines snapping inches from Vekler's leg. He leapt back, firing a burst from his rifle into the creature's side. It vanished with a splash, but the water around them churned violently for long moments before going still again. The baby had not cried, only watched with wide eyes. Vekler looked down and almost smiled. You are braver than many warriors I know, he murmured, adjusting the blanket. He pressed onward, weaving between tangled roots and sinking patches of mud. Above, long vines hung low, brushing against his armor like the touch of cold fingers. Once, one of them tightened suddenly, revealing itself as a vine serpent trying to coil around his arm. Vekler tore it free and tossed it into the water, hearing It hissed before sinking out of sight. Hours passed in the half-light of the misty swamp. The moon above was only a faint blur through the shifting fog. Vekler's legs ached from the constant pull of the mud, and his armor was slick with swamp water. Still, he kept moving, stopping only when the baby stirred restlessly. In a small dry pocket beneath the twisted roots of a dead tree, he crouched down and unsealed a ration pack. The food inside was for soldiers, not infants, but he mashed part of it into a paste and fed it carefully with a small cloth strip. The child accepted it without fuss, small hands curling around his finger. That simple touch was like a spark in the cold, a reminder that this journey was not just about survival, but about protecting something worth more than his own life. A faint rustle came from the water's edge. Vekler froze, listening. The sound grew louder, not the quiet, steady movement of an animal, but the heavy splash of something large and purposeful. Through the mist, a shape emerged, not a predator, but a machine, one of Drex's patrol drones, modified for swamp terrain, its legs hissing as they pierced the water with each step. Its searchlight cut through the fog, passing dangerously. Close to Vekler's hiding place, he held his breath, pulling the baby close so not even the smallest sound escaped. The light lingered for several seconds, scanning the roots and water, before turning away and vanishing into the mist. When it was gone, Vekler exhaled slowly. His people would never stop, not while they thought he carried a human prisoner, and once they realized it was a child, their hunt would only become more determined. He stood and pressed deeper into the marsh, knowing the center was close if he could cross it. The other side offered cover in the form of ancient ruins, places even the boldest soldiers feared to tread. By the time the mist began to thin, the sky was a pale gray. Dawn was coming, though in the swamp it felt no warmer. Vekler finally stepped onto firmer ground, the squelch of mud replaced by the crunch of dry earth. In the distance, the black shapes of the ruins rose like broken teeth against the horizon. For the first time since the chase began, he allowed himself to think. Maybe they could disappear here, at least for a while. The baby was sleeping again, its head resting lightly against his chest. Vekler adjusted his grip and started toward the ruins. The marsh was behind them, but the real dangers lay ahead. And though he did not know it yet, those dangers would not only test his skill as a warrior, they would test the very reason he had chosen to save this child. Asterisk. The ruins loomed ahead, silent and ancient, their jagged stone arches reaching toward the pale morning sky. Vekler moved carefully, scanning the shadows. Legends said these structures were built by a civilization older than both humans and his own kind. Now, they were nothing more than crumbling shelters, haunted by the wind and the occasional scavenger. But to Vekler, they meant cover, a place to rest, to feed the child, and to think. He found a half-collapsed hall with walls still intact on three sides. The roof had caved in long ago, letting a shaft of light fall on the cracked floor. Vekler knelt and laid the baby on a dry piece of cloth, adjusting the blanket so the cold air wouldn't bite. The child stirred but did not cry, its tiny fingers reaching toward the light. For a brief moment, Vekler let his mind wander, imagining what it would be like if this baby were his own. That thought hit him harder than he expected. He shook it off and reached for his ration pack. A faint sound stopped him, the crunch of a boot on loose stone. His hand went to his rifle instantly, his eyes narrowing from the shadowed entrance of the hall. A figure stepped into the light. It was a human, tall but limping, one hand pressed to a bleeding wound at his side. He wore the tattered remains of a medic's uniform. When he saw Vekler, he froze, his other hand twitching toward the pistol at his hip. Neither moved for several seconds, the air between them heavy with the weight of the war. Then the medic's eyes shifted, not to Vekler, but to the bundle on the ground. When he saw the baby, his expression changed from suspicion to shock. That's Captain Morrow's daughter," the medic said in a hoarse voice. Vekler's grip on his weapon tightened. "You know her?" he asked, his tone flat. The medic nodded. his voice trembling. She was lost during the evacuation. We thought she was dead. Vekler expected the man to attack, to demand the child back. Instead, the medic stepped forward slowly, his hands open to show he wasn't drawing his weapon. She needs proper food, warmth, medical care. If she's been with you this long, she's lucky to be alive. The words were strange, no hatred, no accusations, just gratitude. Vekler's brow furrowed. You do not fear that I will kill you? He asked. The medic gave a faint, tired smile. If you wanted to kill me, I'd already be dead. The silence between them shifted. Vekler lowered his rifle slightly, still watching the man closely. The medic knelt beside the baby, checking her breathing with gentle hands. He took a small container from his pouch and handed it to Vekler. Human infant nutrient paste. Better than whatever you've been feeding her. Vekler accepted it, his claws brushing the man's fingers for a brief second. It struck him. This human was risking his life to help a child in the care of his sworn enemy. It was the kind of act Vekler had not believed possible from a human. The medic looked up, his voice quiet but steady. Why did you save her? Vekler hesitated, searching for an answer. Finally he said, because I could not let another child die. Even if she is human. The medic studied him for a moment, then nodded. Then you're not my enemy right now. We're both her protectors. The sound of engines echoed faintly in the distance. Breaking the moment, Vekler's head snapped toward the sound. Drex's forces were closing in again. The medic's eyes narrowed. They're tracking you. They'll find this place soon. Vekler stood, lifting the baby into his arms. You should leave, he said. If they find us together, they will kill you too. But the medic shook his head. Then I'll help you get her out. It was an offer Vekler never thought he would hear. A human soldier offering to fight alongside him. The war in his mind cracked a little more. He gave a slow nod. Very well. But if you betray me, I won't, the medic said firmly. I owe you for saving her. They moved quickly, slipping out of the hall and into the shadowed streets of the ruins. The medic guided them toward an old underground tunnel he claimed would lead beyond the search perimeter. The baby stirred once, letting out a soft cry, and the medic reached over to gently pat her back. Vekler noticed how naturally he did it, like someone who had cared for children before. The engines were louder now, the searchlights beginning to sweep over the tallest ruined towers. Vekler felt the tension rise in his chest for the first time. He wasn't just protecting the child, he was relying on a human to help him do it, and that, more than the hunt, more than the danger, was what truly unsettled him. The underground tunnel was dark and damp, the air thick with the smell of old stone and rusted metal. Vekler moved first, the baby secure in one arm, his rifle in the other. The human medic followed close behind. Limping but steady, above them, the sound of engines grew louder, vibrating through the walls like a distant drumbeat. They were running out of time. The tunnel opened into a large chamber where ancient machines stood like skeletons, their wires hanging like vines. A faint shaft of light from a broken ceiling revealed the dust swirling in the air. Vekler paused, scanning for danger. That pause saved their lives. A sudden burst of gunfire tore through the space they had been about to cross. Sparks exploding from the old machinery. Drex's voice echoed through a loudspeaker. Commander. Vekler. Surrender the human, and you may yet live. Vekler's grip tightened on the baby. Never, he muttered, stepping back into cover. The medic crouched beside him, checking his pistol. They've sealed both ends of the tunnel. We're surrounded. Vekler nodded grimly. Then we break through. Drex's soldiers moved in, their armored boots clanging against the metal floor. Flashlights cut through the dark. Sweeping over the room, Vekler gestured for the medic to hold position while he laid the baby in a safe corner behind a thick piece of machinery. The child whimpered softly, but Vekler placed a clawed finger gently to its lips. Quiet, little one, he whispered. The first soldier appeared between two pillars, and Vekler fired. The shot hit center mass, sending the soldiers sprawling. Shouts filled the air as more poured into the chamber. The medic took careful aim, each shot precise despite his injury. They worked without speaking, one covering while the other moved. It was strange, fighting alongside a human, their movements different. Their instincts alien, yet somehow they fit together in the chaos. A grenade clattered onto the floor near them. Vekler kicked it back before it could detonate, the blast shaking the chamber and sending debris crashing down from above. The medic reloaded quickly. "They're trying to push us toward the east wall," he said. Vekler's eyes narrowed. "That's where the tunnel collapses. They want to trap us." Another wave of soldiers charged in. Vekler met them head-on, using his height and strength to slam one into a pillar. The medic covered his flank, dropping two more with quick shots. But for every soldier they stopped. More came. Drex's voice boomed again, closer this time. "You're a disgrace to your kind, Vekler. Throwing away your honor for a human parasite." Vekler stepped out of cover for just a moment, enough for his voice to carry. "She is no parasite. She is innocent." The words echoed through the chamber, silencing the gunfire for a brief heartbeat. Then the fight resumed, harder than before. A blast from Drex's rifle hit the wall near Vekler, sending shards of stone across his armor. The medic yelled, "North side, there's a service hatch. It might lead out." Vekler grabbed the baby again and followed, firing bursts over his shoulder to keep Drex's men pinned. They reached the hatch, but it was locked by an old, corroded mechanism. Vekler slammed his fist into it, breaking the rusted seal. The door creaked open just enough for the medic to slip through. Then Vekler passed the child to him. "You go first," Vekler ordered. "I'll hold them here." The medic's eyes narrowed. "You won't make it if you stay." Vekler smiled faintly. "If I don't, then at least you and she will." The medic hesitated only a second before disappearing into the hatch with the baby. Vekler turned back to face the soldiers, his rifle low, his stance solid. They came at him in a rush, and he met them with everything he had, firing, striking, moving like a shadow between the pillars. Each moment he bought was another moment the child got farther away from danger. Finally, as Drex himself stepped into the chamber, rifle raised, Vekler detonated a charge on one of the ancient machines. The explosion filled the room with fire and smoke, collapsing part of the ceiling. Through the haze, Vekler slipped toward the hatch, diving inside just as the debris sealed the way behind him in the narrow passage beyond. The medic waited, the baby safe in his arms. Vekler took her back gently. They didn't speak. The pounding of their footsteps in the darkness said enough. Behind them, Drex's voice echoed faintly, full of rage, but ahead was only silence, and for now, that silence meant they had survived. The narrow passage opened into the cool night air. The stars spread above them like scattered fireflies. Vekler stepped out first, scanning the horizon. The ruins were far behind now, their broken towers just dark shapes in the distance. The wind carried no sound of pursuit, only the quiet rustle of dry grass. For the first time in days, Vekler allowed his shoulders to lower. The medic followed, still limping, his eyes scanning the shadows with the habit of a soldier in his arms. The baby slept peacefully, unaware of the war, the danger, or the blood spilled to keep her alive. Vekler took her back gently, holding her close to his chest. Her tiny warmth spread through him like sunlight in a frozen place. For a long moment, he simply stood there, staring at her. It was hard to believe that only days ago he had thought of leaving her to die. They began walking toward the distant hills where the medic said a hidden human outpost still operated. The land here was open and quiet, a wide plain under the pale glow of the moons. Each step felt lighter than the last. But Vekler knew the journey was not over. The war would not stop because of one rescued child. Drex would not forgive, and his people would see him as a traitor. But something inside him had already changed, and there was no going back. Halfway across the plain, they stopped at a shallow stream to rest. Vekler knelt, letting the cool water wash the grime from his hands and face. The medic sat nearby, watching. him quietly. You know they'll never let you go back to your own people, the medic said. Vekler nodded. I know. But I also know I could never return after this. The medic's gaze softened. Then come with us. We'll keep you safe. The offer hung in the air. Vekler had fought humans for years, had seen them as enemies without exception. Now one stood before him, offering not a cell or an execution, but a place among them. He looked down at the child, her small hand gripping the edge of his armor. Her breathing was steady, calm, trusting. That trust was something he could not betray. By dawn, they reached the ridge overlooking the hidden outpost. It was a small cluster of camouflaged shelters, their lights dim against the early light. As they approached, human soldiers stepped forward, weapons raised. Their eyes widened when they saw the child. From within the camp, a woman ran forward, her voice breaking with emotion. Lena. My baby, she cried, tears streaming down her face. Vekler stopped, unsure what to do, until the medic gently took the baby from his arms and handed her over. The mother clutched her daughter. Sobbing quietly, Vekler turned to leave, certain his part was done, but a hand touched his arm, and he turned to see the woman looking at him through her tears. Thank you, she said, her voice trembling but sincere. Those two words struck deeper than any wound he had taken in battle. The commanding officer of the outpost stepped forward. You've saved one of our own. For that, you are welcome here. Vekler hesitated. He was not used to being welcomed, especially by humans. But as he looked around, he saw no hatred in their eyes, only gratitude, curiosity, and something else. Respect, the medic placed a hand on his shoulder. You're one of us now, whether you want to admit it or not. Vekler gave a slow nod. Perhaps the war would still rage. Perhaps his past would never be forgiven by his own kind. But in this place, with these people, he had found something he thought he had lost forever. A reason to protect, not destroy. As the sun rose over the horizon, its light spilling across the camp, Vekler stood quietly. The baby, now safe in her mother's arms, reached toward him one last time. He stepped closer, letting her tiny fingers curl around one of his. A strange warmth filled his chest. The same feeling that had made him pick her up that first night. It was hope, fragile but real, for the first time in years. Vekler looked at the future and did not see only war. He saw the possibility of peace, and he knew that this small human child, once the enemy, now the reason he lived, had shattered the walls he had built around his heart. The moons faded in the growing light, and the day began. But for Vekler, this was more than the start of a new day. It was the start of a new life.